Let's look at the next question that we do have. The next question that we have has something to do. Okay, wait, before we go there. There we go. So it says to us there, table 4 shows the types of voting stations. So it says to us that voting stations is shown by that VS over there. So we know every time we see VS, it represents voting stations used during the 2016 local government elections. And it's so funny, we're always coming across local elections and them using the local elections for us. So maybe it's a paper that was done around that time, I'm not sure. It says to us the types of voting stations. We've got the provinces going on the side over there. Lots of data happening. And then it says to us the voting stations, and it's got the number of voting stations per province, basically. So those are not the number of people that voted. Those are the voting stations. And then we have permanent voting stations, temporary voting stations, and mobile voting stations. I would advise you to know what this means. So if something is permanent, I would assume that you always go to that particular place to go and vote there. If it's mobile, some people, remember, cannot go to the voting station. So the voting station might have to come to them or whatever the case is. Let's look at 5.1.1. It says to us, determine a type of instrument used to collect this data. So now I also had to think a little bit with this type of question. And then I remembered when you are collecting data, there's different types of instruments that you are going to use. It's either you're going to observe, it's either you're going to have a questionnaire, you're going to have a little thing that people are filling out. So there's different types of instruments you can use when you are collecting data. In this particular case, it looks as though they used voting ballots, or they used the stations, or they went and they observed. So you need to determine which one you want to use. Okay, so I would then say voting ballots. I'll use that one as the instrument that has been used over here. So let me just... Okay. 5.1.1. So I'll just say the voting papers that were used. But in this particular case, it could have also been the provinces or whatever the case is. So the next question then says to us, state the province which has the most voting stations. So we need to go and look at the province that has the most voting stations according to the table that we have been given over here. And according to this table that we have been given here, let's look at the numbers. The biggest number for me is looking like the Eastern Cape, but I also see that KZN also has quite a big number. So those numbers are falling under their 4,000s. And I can see that the Eastern Cape is 4,699. But let's look at KZN. KZN is 4,792. So automatically, that is going to be the province. So let's go and write that down. So I'm just going to say KZN. 5.1.3. So now we're still having our easy peasy marks. This is paper 1. And remember that paper 1 does have your more basic type of questions. It does have your... level 1 and level 2 type of questions. Determine the mean number of voting stations in South Africa. The mean means the average. How do I calculate average? Average, I add all the number of voting, all the voting stations, okay? And then I divide by the number of numbers. So it says to me, the mean number of voting stations in South Africa. So I'm going to go and add all the numbers that I have been given over there, and I'm going to divide it by the provinces. So let's go and see the numbers that I have been given over there. So the total number is going to be 22,612, and then I'm going to divide it by the number of provinces that I do have. So let me just remove this over here so that I'm not confused. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 789. So I'm going to divide that number by 9 and it's going to give me the mean. Okay, and it's going to be 3 marks. So I need to show my calculation, which is 22,612. And if that was not given, guys, then I was going to have to add it myself. So let's go calculate that. 22,612 divided by 9. That gives us 2,512. I think I saw a 4. No, 4. So I'm going to round that off to 2 decimal places. That's going to be my mean. That's going to be my average. That's the average of then the voting stations that we have. 5.1.4. So that's mean. You add, divide by the number of numbers. That's the mean. Another word for mean is average. So if you were asked and they said to you, give the average, don't panic. Next, write down the modal number of mobile voting stations in South Africa. Modal just means mode, guys. Modal just means mode. So we need to see the modal number of mobile voting stations. Mode, what is a mode? It's a number that repeats itself more than once and then it repeats itself the most. Let's look at it. So here we have to look at it in terms of mobile. There's a 3, I see. There's a 12, there's a 12, there's a 3, there's a 2. So 3 and 12 repeat themselves twice. So 3 and 12 is the modal number. 3 and 12. 5.1.5. So did you see what I did there? You can have more than one modal number. Sometimes learners will say to me, ma'am, there's more than one. Yes, you can have more than one. So let's go to the next one. It says, determine the total number of temporary voting stations as a percentage of the total number of voting stations in South Africa. Whenever you are asked something like this, it means that you are going to first have it as a fraction and then multiply it by 100 to get it as a percentage. So the total number of temporary voting stations, that's going to be the numerator. Total number of voting stations is the numerator as a percentage out of South Africa. Let's go see the temporary voting stations. So temporary voting stations is 1,228 out of the total in South Africa, which is 22,000. So that's going to be that type of fraction going on over there. So it's going to be 1,228 all over the total number, which is 22,612 times 100. 1,228 divided by 22,612. So multiply that by 100 because we want it as a percentage. 5.43%. That's a very small percentage to be working with, but in any case, that is what we are being asked. That is 3 marks. The next question says, determine the probability. Again, we've been looking at probability throughout this whole revision session to show us that probability can be thrown into anything. Determine the probability of randomly selecting a mobile voting station in South Africa. What is the probability of randomly selecting? This is exactly the same question as the one before, but this time we're working with a mobile voting station in South Africa. How many mobile voting stations do we have in South Africa? We have 32. So we know probability is going to be a fraction. So it's going to be 32 all over this all over this times 100. That's the probability of selecting that. So 5.1.6. That's going to be 32 all over 22,000 because it's South Africa. Times 100 because we want the, oh, no. So let's be careful with that one. It says to us, it doesn't say to us that we need to leave it as a percentage. There it is. But let's see if we can make it in simplest form. 32 divided by 22,612. So can you see that in its simplest form, it then gives us 8 over 5,653. Five, 6, 5, 3. That's that in its simplest form. Please, guys, always leave it in its simplest form. Always leave your fractions in their simplest form. The next question says, show how the value of 145 was calculated. Let's look at 145 to see exactly what they're asking us for here. Here's 145, guys. They want to know how 145 was calculated. My guess, my wild guess would be that these two numbers were subtracted from each other. So what would it then be? It would be 3,111 minus 2,966. Let's go see if it really does give us that number. Wild guess. Minus 2,966. Oh, there, you see, 145. That's how it was calculated. So you need to show those things. Let's look at the very last question, if we can finish that off. So this one says that we need to use the bar graph on the answer sheet and shows the total number of voting stations. But now it says to us that we need to go in and fill in the remaining bars. So let's look at it quickly, but we won't have enough time to fill in the remaining bars. But I do want us to just take a quick look at it. So what do we have going on over here? We've got the different types of voting stations going on. Here we have, and it doesn't really show that nicely, or it shows nicely. So we've got the provinces at the bottom here, and we have the number of voting stations at the bottom there. So what they are asking us is to basically draw whatever it is that is remaining over there. So you would take the numbers and you would just go in and plug them in and draw. But in this case, you would be drawing the permanent voting stations. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in and just being in this session with me. That's it from me, Lebogang Dube. Thank you so much to Liberty for sponsoring our show. I hope that you guys will be with us again next week as we continue with our revision session and in you preparing for your exams further on. Thank you so much. See you next week.